Yes, I'm wearing all plaid to look more Canadian. Gravlax is one of my favorite family recipes. It's something that my mom used to make every Christmas. It is basically the Scandinavian version of lox. Lox typically is dry brined and finished with low smoke, but Gravlax is only dry brine with a ton of aromatics. So that's what we're going to do today, and we may or may not give it a Canadian twist, which may or may not be maple syrup. So stay tuned for that. First off, let's talk salmon. When you're gonna make Gravlax, you want to use the head piece of the salmon. What that does is basically this part towards the head of the salmon doesn't get as thin as opposed to the tail piece. Why you want to use the head piece is because you want an even curing to happen. That's what you want, and you want 1.5 pounds of it. So we'll set that aside and we'll make the brine. So first off, for the brine, I have what seems like a lot, but 1/4 cup of whole black peppercorns. And I'm gonna toast those. I know I always toast my spices, but I just want really make sure you guys freshen those up, because you don't know how long they have been in the grocery store for sitting on that shelf. So you wanna freshen those up, and we'll put those in a 325 oven just for 5 minutes until it kind of starts crackling, and then you're good to go. All right, Gravlax Brine, very simple. Just take a little bowl, and we'll start it off with 1/2 cup of coarse salt. The reason you're using coarse salt is because it won't cure as quickly as it would for super fine salt. By curing a little bit slowly, you're gonna get a texture that's more buttery as opposed to a texture that's rubbery. Next in here, I'm gonna do 1 whole bunch of dill. Trim up the very bit at the end and just go all the way down pretty finely, and that will be going with my salt, same bowl. Next in here, let's get the zest of 2 lemons. All right, zest of 2 lemons right in here. Black pepper is toasted, smells great. As it's coming out of the oven, I'm gonna put it straight up in the grinder or a mortar and pestle. It's a lot easier to grind it when it's still warm. And you don't want it too fine, because that's just gonna make your salmon black. You just want to crack it up to get all the aromas out. And going over here. So, last 2 ingredients are more of the wet kind. 1/4 cup of white wine, and then, you guessed it, 1/4 cup of maple syrup. Here's the French Canadian twist. This is it for the brine now, which is gonna give that a very nice stir. So now, for the curing part. I'm gonna do it in a baggie. I'm gonna use 2/3 of this and put 2/3 on the top of the salmon. And for my last third, I'm gonna be creating a bed for the salmon in the bag. Now I've got this, all I'm gonna do is transfer it on the top of the bed, right in here. Out all the juices that I lost here. Close the bag. You don't want it to have too much air in it. That's gonna go in the fridge like this for 2 days. 1 day on this side, and the other day, just flip it on this side. That's it. Now we wait 2 days. I have a couple chunks of salmon that have been curing for 2 days and that are ready for rinsing. For the rinsing, it's very simple. A little bit of cold water. You wanna be pretty thorough, because the more salt that stays on there, the firmer it's gonna get as it sits. Now that it's rinsed like this, I'll put it on a little dry paper towel. And I have this other version here that I didn't tell you about, but if you do have a little beet on hand, you can grate a raw small beet and add it to that dry brine, and that will make a beet cured Gravlax. Very, very cool looking. This is definitely a showstopper. My mom, over the holidays, used to always serve this the same way, which was thinly sliced, plated, and topped with a vinaigrette. It's a Dijon and maple vinaigrette, so I'll show you how to make that very quickly. So first off, 1 small clove of garlic in my mortar, and I put a little salt, and that's gonna make it go. That's gonna make it fall apart. That's gonna make it, the salt's gonna make it a lot easier for it to, how can I say that?
The salt helps break it apart.
The salt is just gonna help breaking it down faster. So once it's broken down like this, I will add about a teaspoon of capers, and I will also hit those up with the garlic. Also a teaspoon of Dijon, 2 teaspoons of maple syrup. And to this dough, now I'm gonna add the acid. The acid is gonna be about a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, which is 2 ounces, which is about the juice of 1 juicy lemon. So this here, because there's a bunch of raw garlic, I'm gonna let that sit with the vinegar, with the lemon juice for about 10 minutes to kind of like have all the flavors become friendly together and have the garlic start to macerate. Macerating is gonna mean take the raw flavor out of the garlic from the addition of acid. So that's what we're doing right now. Let that sit for about 10 minutes. And the only thing that's missing here is 1/2 cup of olive oil. It doesn't really need to be emulsified. I want to tell you something about vinaigrette. I just don't believe that vinaigrettes need to be emulsified. It just makes you believe that you don't have to stir your vinaigrette when in fact the vinegar will always sink even if it's emulsified or not. So you always want to make sure you mix your vinaigrette very, very, very thoroughly before reusing it. All right, so I've got this thinly sliced. And like I said, my mom would just serve it with a little bit of this vinaigrette, drizzle on top, just like this. A little sweetness, a little acidity, a little pickles, of course, because we're trying to stay on brand here. Might as well make it right on the dough. That's it. A beautiful plate of Gravlax. The least difficult salmon curing I think I've ever made. But like I said, this is an extremely simple recipe. Stays good in the fridge for weeks if you wrap it up tightly. Months in the freezer, and I really hope you give it a try. It's really exceptionally simple. And exceptionally delicious. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you give my mom's Gravlax recipe a try because it's really outstanding. So, cheers.